Who's going to ruin this great idea called America? Politicians.
Is a reverse market crash threatening your assets? Patrick Bet-David just came out with an interesting video on this topic that went viral, and I want to comment on it, review it, and critique it so you get a wider and more diverse perspective on this interesting but also worrisome topic. Now, please, Patrick, your stage.
You know what's worse than a market crash? A reverse market crash, a concept I've been talking about on the podcast. So what is a reverse market crash? That's when all of a sudden the market just balloons up. And you're like, wait a minute, what happened? And you're trying to hold it, and you see the rich.
So actually the word reverse market crash may be a little bit misleading in the beginning, because it really means that the asset prices are going up very fast.
Get rich and the poor get poor. Now you may say, Pat, how is that even possible? I want you to look at this chart from Pew Research. Everybody that's a politician that becomes a governor or Congress or Senate, they all want to claim, we got to help the middle class. We got to help middle income. But look what this data is telling us from Pew Research. According to this data, if you look at the green at the top, that's upper income aggregate.
Yeah, well, Patrick, this is no news. Every time that a country has a fractional banking system, that means that the money creation comes from the banks, and the country has a fiat currency system, so that means that the currency is not backed by hard assets like a gold standard. This is the result, or slash this is the end result. So it's inherent in the system.
It's wealth in the U.S. Yellow is middle America, middle income, and the light green is lower income. To the left, the wealth in America, only 60% of it was with upper income back in 1983, 32 was with middle, and 7 was with lower. Fast forward to 2016, it's even worse today. It went from 60% of the wealth to 79%. Middle income went from 32% of the wealth down to 70. That's a drop of nearly 50%. And lower income went from 7% to 4%. That's a drop off of 40%.
True, and let me maybe add that this is a development that we not only see in the United States, you also see it in Europe, you also see it in Australia, you also see it in Japan. So it is really a result of a certain financial system that always has this end result.
You may be asking, where are we going with this? This is the point. Every time we're printing money to assume and say these politicians, we're helping the low and middle income family. You give them money, guess what they don't know how to do? They don't know how to save. They're experts at spending. The government doesn't teach them how to save. They just give them the money and they know they're going to spend it. And then when they spend it, what do? They buy product.
Yeah, well, this is true. Money printing really means taking economic energy from the future and spending it now. And the bitter truth is that one day is payday. You will have to pay back for that.
Somebody owes them. They owe this, they buy a camera, they buy a drink. It goes to the companies. So you give the money to the poor, knowing the money is really not being given to the poor. It's going to float to the top, which is who? The rich. That's how the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer.
Yes, Patrick, that is true, but I hope we agree that it is really the fault of the people. They had the chance to save and they chose to spend it. So it is a cultural issue also. And by the way, again, not only in the United States, same is true in the rest of the Western world.
And today I'm going to give you a few examples of what a reverse market crash could look like. Case studies, actual reality, what happened. One is Germany, one is Zimbabwe, one is Iran, one is Argentina, one is Turkey, and maybe a couple other ones. But let's start off with Germany. So back in the days, in 1914, 1913 or so, if you wanted to buy a dollar and convert your currency from Germany marks to a dollar, you needed 4 marks. Again, this is 1914. So hey, here's 4 marks. Here's $1. You with me so far? 9 years later, in 1923, you know how much it took to just get $1 How many marks? 1 trillion marks.
So the name of the game here really is hyperinflation. And I wonder whether the better word for reverse market crash would be asset price development in times of hyperinflation.
Did you hear what I just said? It took 1 trillion marks to get $1, and it only happened in 9 years. Now why? Let me explain. After losing World War I, the Treaty of Versailles forced Germany $33 billion in reparations. So during this time, Germany lost a significant amount of territory where it was manufacturing goods. They were forced to print money to meet the reparation demands. This simultaneously added money to and removed goods from the economy. Catastrophic. By 1922, price had risen by nearly 700%, causing hyperinflation. The government had to print million mark notes, then billion mark notes. And by the way, you ever hear the saying, a wheelbarrow full of money couldn't even buy a newspaper? This is kind of where it comes from.
Yeah, well, this is true, Patrick. I would like to add that Germany suspended the gold standard, which was a guarantee for a stable financial system and stable prices. It suspended it at the beginning of, or at the start of World War I, so that it would be able to finance the enormous cost of leading a world war. So a lot of money was actually printed already during the war. And then obviously when Germany, as you rightly mentioned, lost the war, it had to print even more. And then at the end led to hyperinflation. Is that something that is comparable today? Well, not maybe in terms of the environment. We are not yet in a world war environment, hopefully never will be. But we've been printing a lot of money in the Western world to save the financial system. So please go on, Patrick.
Because this is when it went from 4 marks buying $1 to 1 trillion marks buying $1 US. And by the way, just to kind of show you some data here, if you look at this chart here, this shows you from 1918, where it took roughly 100 marks to buy a US dollar. Look how quickly it goes 5 years later to 1 trillion marks, right? That chart tells an entire story.
That, Patrick, is very true. And then it presupposes that after the hyperinflation, you will be able to enjoy your assets freely. And if you look at the history of major economic powers, and if you look at the history of hyperinflationary periods, you realize that quite often after these hyperinflation, you had a currency reform and you had some kind of confiscation and expropriation to finance the social programs needed because a large part of the population got poor. So yes, hard assets help, but beware of governmental action after the hyperinflation.
Next, we have Zimbabwe. In 2015, Zimbabwe's $100 trillion note was worth only 40 US cents. In the early 2000s, Zimbabwe government attempted a land redistribution effort which disrupted the farming industry, causing an agricultural production collapse. After monthly inflation peaked by one measure at 79.6 billion%, the government in 2009 abolished their dollar and began using US dollar instead. The currency switch brought monetary stability for a few years until the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe could no longer meet the demands for US dollar. Money stored in the bank accounts could no longer be withdrawn in cash, and in early 2019, the central bank reintroduced the Zimbabwe dollar, changing US dollar denominated savings and domestic government debts into a local currency of rapidly...
Yeah, Zimbabwe is a well-known and often discussed example of a country that was totally irresponsible and that destroyed the economic and the financial system through money printing. And it doesn't come easy to me, but I have to ask the question, and I would want to put it on your table. Are we going down the same road in the West, in the United States and other Western countries?